Are there further questions from members? The member for Wright.
Thank you, Chair. Minister, could I take you to Budget Paper 4, Volume 1, page 202, Performance Indicators, in particular retention? Can the Minister explain where he is at in terms of meeting the commitment to develop a tool that would track students who didn't complete school? So finding out, as my understanding, finding out where they are lost to in the system?
There's a couple of aspects to this question, and one of them is in relation to what measures the government talks about. So I recall in previous times people talking about the SACE completion rate as, headlining government press releases without perhaps the identification that that's the completion rate of those who are studying their SACE in October, who completed it at the end of the year. And I have never found that an enormously useful tool. Now, in relation to what is more useful is in relation to retention rates, for example, for those who start in Year 8, might complete Year 12. That's a really useful figure, and we've got some information about that. So it's in the 70% for most years, rather than the 96 to even 105%, I think in 2016 it was reported, which is the SACE completion rate. And that's because, of course, some students may complete who weren't on the list in October. Anyway, so that's probably beside the point. The member refers to a tool. So there's a couple of pieces of work going on. The first is a body of work that was commissioned a year and a half ago, I reckon, which related to earning and learning, what is happening with those students who are not completing school in our public system. We identify that a number of them may well go to the non-government sector and a number of them may well move states, but we're really interested in what are the group who might be dropping out of the system. So that report is not far away. It's a significant report. It was undertaken by ACER, who won the opportunity to do that work. The tool to track them is what's known as a unique student identifier. Now, this is a national body of work because, of course, one of the key reasons that a lot of kids leave our schools is because they move state. And so it has to be a national body of work. It's come out of the Gonski reforms. It's one of the commitments we signed up to when we signed up to the National School Funding Reform Agreement. It's one of the priorities that's being undertaken by Education Council. It's not a small body of work. It's progressing. I'm looking forward to its implementation, but we're not there yet. We won't be there for a little while. We won't be there for just a year or two. And Education Council will report on that after Education Council meets. I'm certain that had it not been for the pandemic, Education Council would have been talking a lot more about this during this year. We've been talking about other things instead largely, but the work, I think it's the Schools Policy Group within Education Council.
Yeah, it's the subgroup under ASOC.
Under ASOC, which is the officials group in Education Council, is progressing that work. All states are committed to it. It wasn't something that was necessarily to be assumed would happen. There was some policy discussions about whether or not a unique student identifier had privacy implications that needed to be taken into consideration. We thought that the benefit to being able to keep track of these students, help ensure they don't fall through the cracks, was a massive benefit, and we're really keen to see that work continue to progress at national level. And look, I don't think we'll be in here in 12 months with the USI, but I hope that we'll have a really clear roadmap by then to when it can be implemented. A USI, to be clear, unique student identifier.
Thank you, Minister, for your answer. And just for the sake of clarity, I refer to a commitment that you made in the Advertiser on the 5th of July 2018 to better data collect to determine the employment and training outcomes of students who leave early to make sure they are not slipping through the net.
Yes, so there are two aspects to that. The first is, and I think there was probably, that might have been the media release that prefaced the ACER research work. I stand to be corrected on that, but certainly that large body of work is underway. And in terms of a tool, the unique student identifier is the relevant piece of work, and at that stage, that date, I believe, would have been prior to the signing of the National School Reform Agreement, so it was obviously a tool that was in discussion as a result of the Gonski report. Let me hold 1 second. Yeah, what I actually will do, I'll take that question on notice as well, because I think that there is some useful further information that I can probably provide. I'm really keen to provide as much information as I can. I think it's good work, but I just want to make sure that I don't give information from Education Council that hasn't yet been cleared for release.
Thanks, Minister. Last question on that topic. Just to be clear, though, the piece of work to which you refer in that media release that I think you're right then became the article from Tim Williams in the Advertiser, that is not complete yet?
I think it's the work has been completed. I think that it's not far away from release.
Member for Wright.
Thank you, Minister. I'll take you to Budget Paper 3, Volume 1, page 190, and VET within secondary education. Sorry, Budget Paper 4, you are correct. Volume 1, VET within secondary education, page 190. Minister, could you inform the committee if it's true that TAFE auspicing in secondary schools will no longer be occurring or no longer taking place?
No, I think I have some information about that. Let me just... Sorry, you'll forgive me. I think the information I have about that is in the TAFE section of my... So, in relation to this, there's a consideration by the TAFE board of what they're doing to support schools. Their decisions obviously are also influenced by seeking to have their relevant standards being aligned with the directions from the national regulator, the Australian Schools Quality Authority. I'm sure the member would understand the importance of that to the TAFE board. So when the member talks about auspicing, this is where TAFE has effectively a delivery of training services being undertaken under what is called the VET in Schools Agreement, often referred to as a visa program, so where the school can deliver the program under TAFE's name. Now, ASQA, the national regulator, has had a bit to say about these visa arrangements at the national level in recent times. And so TAFE has indicated that they are going to reduce the number of schools where they are offering the visa programs to in 2021. TAFE's position is that this ensures compliance with the Standards for Registered Training Organisations 2015, which is administered by ASQA in an area of high risk as identified by ASQA. So there are 16 visa arrangements that are qualified to be considered under an exceptional circumstance based on a set of principles for a limited scope delivery in 2021. So this is where schools are in a position where we want to, TAFE has agreed to look at continue delivering that auspicing arrangement in those circumstances, in those 16 schools. So TAFE SA is currently working with schools who wish to take up the offer of a visa arrangement in 2021 to ensure that the governance and compliance documentation is in place. A 2021 MOAA between TAFE and the Department for Education for visa is in its final stages of development. And TAFE SA are working with the department on that. And there's a range of work that's going to produce, not just in relation to visas, but also looking at, I think, what's being called stackable VET, pre-vocational qualifications, participation in VETRO, which is there's a lot of abbreviations in this portfolio. You guys are very well aware. So VETRO, if you're not familiar with it, is VET Readiness Orientation. It's often something that you would offer to a student to give them a familiarity with some of those vocational opportunities. it's really important to recognise there's also the capacity, and this is in many ways a really desirable outcome for schools to be engaging with TAFE or other providers, but it's usually TAFE, for TAFE to deliver certificate training directly rather than having it done by school staff, bearing in mind that while there are a number of our school staff who have outstanding industry experience, one of the requirements that vet providers are expected to ensure is that provision of certificate training is in line with the national training package and as much as we can delivered by people with the relevant experience. And so the delivery of courses by TAFE directly is not necessarily a bad outcome.
Thanks, Minister, for your answer.
It can certainly provide a complication to a school that has an existing visa and wishes to continue it.
Thanks for your answer, Minister, and referring to that answer where you say that it looks like there could be 16 schools offering the visa program in 2021. That would be, if that is indeed to go ahead, that would be down from how many schools currently offering auspice TAFE programs, or courses rather?
It's a question that we can check with TAFE later today, if you like, rather than taking on notice now.
Narunga.
Question from Budget Paper 4, Volume 1, page 190, under Investing Expenditure Summary. Minister, with a particular focus on My Electorate and Narunga, can you update this committee on how local works are progressing and the budget support for schools and preschools in My Electorate?
For the question, and it was indeed with the member for Narunga that I was able to travel around the Yorke Peninsula and to some of the sites on the Adelaide Plains as well at the beginning of this year, prior to the first set of restrictions in relation to COVID, and I'm really pleased we were able to undertake those visits. We visited a lot of schools, we visited a lot of preschools, and I remember in particular there was one of the preschools in the members' electorate. I want to say it was the Kadina Preschool Centre, Wallaroo. Yeah, the Wallaroo the Wallaroo Preschool Centre, where we just had a fantastic conversation with the director about what they would do if they had some extra support, and I was so pleased that they got that $20,000 grant, as did all of the other preschools in the members area, and they're going to be able to do even more to lift the physical built infrastructure of their preschools and deal with those maintenance challenges with the new $30,000 maintenance grant. And those, so those, whether it's Ardrossan, Butte, Central York, Kadina, Mallala, Minlaton, Moonta, Point Pearce, Port Broughton, Port Wakefield, Snowtown, Wallaroo and Waruka, and indeed Yorktown. All of those preschools and early childhood centres in the members' electorate will benefit from that $50,000 investment, and the schools in the members' electorate will as well. Now, in the accelerated maintenance program that we announced as part of the first stimulus package, Central York, Minlaton, Port Broughton, Snowtown, Wallaroo Mines, Waruka and Yorktown schools all benefited from that. There was a significant amount of work, particularly in the members' electorate, where, and some of these were for years, projects had been identified as needing support from central office and identified and given the tick and identified by the facilities manager of the school and approved by infrastructure, but for which there was not yet a funding source that was enabled. And so having those funding sources identified with the $25 million extra allocation of maintenance funding this year enabled all of those projects, some in the hundreds of thousands of dollars, to be able to complete it and lift those urgent maintenance works to be done. And now for every single one of the schools, the public schools in the members' electorate, to get these grants from between $20,000, so a school like Moonta and Kadina, which get the $20,000 grants because they indeed are benefiting from capital works, $3.5 million at Kadina, $4 million at Moonta. They will get those benefits of those $20,000 grants, but other schools will be between $30,000 and $100,000, depending on their size, whether they're secondary or primary, and what other programs they have. So those are going to be fantastic opportunities for the governing councils and the school principals to work together to identify what can be done, what needs to be done, and to engage local tradies and small businesses in providing work for them at a time where they've never needed it more.
Member for Wright.
Thank you, Chair. And Minister, just to go back to TAFE auspicing. So I have been able to find the figure in my notes. There's currently 66 schools which offer TAFE courses or courses auspiced by TAFE, but at their secondary school taught by their own staff. So, and I see that 29 are in the metropolitan area and 37 in the regions. Do you have a list of, assuming that 16 schools will go on to teach the visa program, what the 50 schools who will no longer offer those courses will be?
A couple of reflections, and again, the detail the member's referring to, TAFE may have this afternoon possibly in their session. Schools don't just use TAFE to support their vocational training requirements. Some use other non-government providers. Recall one example, indeed, where there was a school that was, I think this is 2018, I was brought to my attention after the change in government, where a school was seeking to offer some vocational training without a visa, and so those students ended up getting some SACE credits but not necessarily getting a certificate qualification, which was very unfortunate. And that arrangement can be complex, but it was indeed schools sometimes make the decision to try out for a different non-government provider. But that's actually up to the school level to determine what they would like to, what provider they would like to approach. Now, TAFE may well have made a specific decision in relation to a certain number of campuses, but I don't have that information here. As I say, there's a TAFE session this afternoon. I'm happy to come back to it.
Thank you, Minister. Same budget line. Given that one of the appealing features of the auspicing process is that it's cheaper for schools because their own existing staff can teach the course, what will the cost implications potentially be for schools, I guess, and or students wishing to take those courses where they will not be able to do so in one of the 16 of the 66 left offering it on an auspice basis?
Necessarily accept the basic premise of the question. Obviously, we have a key responsibility to all of our students, whether they're in schools or whether they are in only in training, vet training, whether they are apprentices, trainees, or whether they are people doing short courses or anything else, that the quality of their training be at a high level. We have a responsibility to those students for their benefit so that they can get a job in the area that they've identified they want to undertake vocational education. And we have a responsibility to the businesses and industries who rely on those schools, who rely on those training provisions to be at a high quality in line with the National Training Package. Now, ASQA had some serious concerns about some of the work that TAFE was doing in 2017, not aligning necessarily with what was expected in the National Training Package. TAFE has done an enormous body of work in the last 2.5 years to ensure that there are no questions over the quality of their delivery and the identification that their delivery is in line with the National Training Package, and that further provides confidence to businesses to engage TAFE. It provides surety to students that when they graduate or they receive a parchment, a certificate from TAFE, that it is recognised as being at the highest quality. Now, ASQA, the same body, has been, as we identified in the earlier answer, has some reservations about the use of the visa program, and so the TAFE board has made a decision, independent of me, independent of the Department for Education, to have a serious look at that, and that's had some consequences of the way that their delivery model will be done in the future, and they're reducing the number of visa engagements. I've been advised in relation to one of the earlier questions that I don't think I took on notice, but nevertheless I will still provide to the member that there are 49 visa arrangements. I assume that means with TAFE this year. So yeah, it is fewer. It is a number that is less. But it is also critically important that all of those schools have the opportunity to engage in training arrangements. Now, if they don't get the auspicing arrangements with TAFE that they had before, what we want to ensure is their students have access to a quality vet program that will give those students a certificate or a pathway that will help them get a job in the industry that they're desiring to be working in, and that they don't have any question mark over whether their parchment is adequate or whether there's a quality question over the organisation delivering it. I think that when it comes to TAFE SA and quality, that it is understandable the TAFE board will have a focus on delivering those quality outcomes.
Member for Wright.
Thank you, Chair. Minister, I accept your comments about the importance for quality courses. I'm wondering whether or not, though, you can rule out that there will be an increase in cost to students under the new proposed model, where I understand 16 schools will offer the visa program, down from the current number of 66.
Sorry, cost to students?
Or school or students. I mean, the school, I think, at the moment largely absorbs it. That's the attractive thing for students. But if that is not how it's run anymore, then the cost of private training providers providing it must be absorbed somewhere.
Yeah, look, this isn't just a matter where it's the advisors that I have here who would be relevant. TAFE will be relevant. Indeed, the Department of Innovation and Skills is also relevant in this discussion because, of course, we have a subsidised training list that provides subsidised training for those industry areas that have been identified by the Department of Innovation and Skills through the Training and Skills Commission's advice as being in need. So there are certainly significant incentives for young people, either at school or not, to undertake training, particularly in areas of skills need. And this government's investment in this area is massive compared to other states, compared to previous years. It's in the hundreds of millions of dollars. And what you're seeing is an uptake in skilled traineeships and apprenticeships in this state like no other jurisdiction. I think it might be Tasmania is the only other state that saw an uptick at all in the last data, but South Australia's was much more significant, set against a backdrop of a national decline.
Member for Davenport.
Thank you, Chair. On the subject of skills acquisitions, Minister, can you provide us with further detail of the professional development being undertaken with the Orbis program? And I refer to Budget Paper 4, Volume 1, page 198.
Yeah, thank you. I thank the member for Davenport for the question, and it's a real pleasure to be able to provide some information to the committee about the work being done by a group of people in the Education Department under the project title Orbis. It's also known as the Expert Teaching and Leadership Academy. So Orbis was established in the Department for Education in April 2019. Its goal is to provide exemplary learning for leaders and teachers, focusing its professional learning on system-wide priorities in support of world-class education. So I really want to identify that our educators, teachers and leaders have identified and passionately engaged with Orbis in the last year and a half. On the first day of our unexpected lockdown last week, for example, teachers who were expecting to present their final applied learning projects at Orbis in Hindmarsh flexibly adjusted to Microsoft Teams and lasted the whole day online with their colleagues. One of them had their 18-month-old baby by their side. I can report from having some experience that is a circumstance where outside of the usual engagement that anyone in a workplace environment has to have, but increasingly more and more of the people in our community now have. And I really want to commend that person for successfully completing that day online. And I think that's an example of the demonstration of the professionalism and the commitment our teachers have to developing their knowledge and their teaching practice so that they can have an even greater impact on their students' learning regardless of what's happening around them. They didn't, I think that they would have been understood if they hadn't presented on that day for that professional learning opportunity, but they were really enthusiastic and really appreciating what Orbis is able to do for their professional practice. The way Orbis is operating, it's a deliberate shift in a new direction. So leaders and teachers are at their best when they apply contemporary research and their best evidence practices about teaching and learning in their daily work. They combine their experience with their understanding of evidence-based best practice and contemporary research. So the programs that Orbis offers provide leaders and teachers with purposeful, collaborative and empowering learning. Our expert providers make sure the research and best practice examples are contextualised. They're built on the knowledge and expertise that our people already bring. Orbis's launch programs were designed to deliver on the department's system-wide focus on literacy and numeracy and instructional leadership in the first instance in line with school improvement reform. The partnership was with the University of Melbourne and the Harvard Graduate School of Education, and so Orbis focused on literacy R3 and 7 to 9 and numeracy R3 and instructional leadership. As a measure of Orbis's success, the number of spaces available for leaders and teachers tripled in the 2020 school year to 406 enrolments. COVID-19 did cause disruptions to program delivery with postponement during Term 2 of 2020. However, leaders and teachers were provided the option to either continue their learning or postpone their participation in the program until 2021, supporting personal preferences and school community needs. So earlier this year, also Orbis designed a thought leadership series. Educational experts provided actionable insights and reflections to support our leaders given the rapidly changing times of 2020. Given the successful implementation of the launch programs, Orbis is now expanding to include preschool literacy, preschool numeracy, literacy 3 to 6, mathematics 3 to 5, and mathematics 7 to 9. In addition, Orbis will be expanding to support the transition of primary school teachers into high schools as part of the Year 7 to High School project. The suite of professional learning includes 7 to 9 curriculum programs, understanding adolescent learners, which is very important in that junior secondary environment, literacy across the curriculum, and fourthly, special option programs to support teachers new to teaching students with disabilities. This means that from 2021, Orbis will also have new expert providers, including Griffith University and Flinders University. Supporting the growing demand for world-class professional learning, Orbis is currently looking to expand its footprint within the Education Development Centre because we have an expanding number of programs and participants, and I really want to congratulate all the staff at Orbis and all of the educators, teachers and leaders who have engaged so successfully with the programs this year and last since its installation in April last year.
Member for Wright.
Thank you, Chair. Minister, budget paper for volume 1, page 191, and in relation to the upgrade, if I can call it that, of South Road, what impact will that upgrade of South Road have on Black Forest Primary School, Richmond Primary School, Warrapendi School or St Anthony's Primary School?
Thank the member for the question. So obviously the member is familiar that when complete, expected in 2030, around 60% of the Torrens to Darlington project will be underground tunnels, and that will obviously significantly reduce the impact on the community, potentially schools as well, compared to what would have been the case had we not included tunnels in the design, as indeed I think was the proposal a couple of years ago when we came to government. So there are those 3 government schools and the other site the member mentioned in the question. The Department for Education is obviously working at the moment with the Department for Infrastructure and Transport to mitigate as much as practicable any possible impacts on those schools. I don't have the details of those potential impacts, if any, at this stage. It's fair to say that the Hybrid Plus option being identified as the preferred way to deliver that Torrens to Darlington project will see any risk of that reduced. And indeed, I know that the Department for Infrastructure and Transport is doing a significant body of work in the coming months, engaging with the community and working on clearly answering some of those questions. I can advise that that engagement with the community from DIT has begun with Warrapendi School, Richmond Primary School, Black Forest Primary School, also St Bernadette, St Anthony's and St George's, but that shouldn't necessarily be taken to assume that there will be impacts. I think that there will be a significant body of work to be done in the coming months, and more information will be provided as it becomes available.
Same budget line. In light of that upgrade, will the capital works which are planned for Black Forest Primary School, who I think was allocated $5 million under the Building Better Schools Fund, will they continue or be paused, or will any change be made in terms of the timeline for the delivery of that project?
So at Black Forest Primary School, my understanding is that the scoping work for that is still underway, and so obviously there's a significant importance of undertaking that scoping work with the Torrens to Darlington project in mind, to ensure that any new buildings, for example, would be constructed as part of the works if located on a section of the site away from South Road, to reduce any potential impacts of the project. But the timeline isn't necessarily problematic just yet. we would imagine that there'll be work between the school, the Department for Education, the Department for Infrastructure and Transport, and that will take place. Again, if there's further information that comes out in the course of those discussions, I'm sure we'll be keen to share it with the public and the local school community there as much as possible. We're very excited about the possible improvements to Black Forest Primary School, and I think the school will be too.
Members, the time agreed and allocated for the examination of school education has expired. Therefore,